Ryu Yama always thought he and his best friend, Yutei, would be otaku buddies forever. They spent their days completely immersed in their favorite games and anime, totally ignoring the real world. But one day, everything changes when Yuta suddenly drops a massive bombshell on him. To Ryo's absolute horror, Yuita reveals that he has actually gotten a girlfriend. Feeling completely betrayed, Ryu watches in disbelief as his best friend happily chats with a cute girl. He cannot fathom how Yuta managed to escape their otaku lifestyle while leaving him behind. As Yuta walks away with his new girlfriend, Ryu is left standing there, completely shattered. Plunged into absolute despair, Ryo realizes he is now the only loner left in their duo. He bitterly laments his pathetic fate, whining about how unfair the world is to a hardcore otaku. Wallowing in self-pity, he mindlessly scrolls through his phone, feeling more isolated than ever. But out of nowhere, his phone is suddenly snatched right out of his hands. Startled, Ryu looks up to see exactly who dared to steal his precious device in his moment of grief. Standing before him is an energetic girl with bright pink hair, looking down at him with an amused smirk. She seems completely unfazed by his dramatic aura of despair and casually starts teasing him. Ryo demands his phone back, highly annoyed that a random girl is suddenly invading his personal space. Instead of handing it over, she simply laughs and continues to mock his pathetic, lonely state. She ruthlessly points out that wallowing in sadness over his friend's relationship will not change his own single status. Realizing she has the upper hand, the mischievous girl proposes a deal to the helpless Ryu. She promises to return his smartphone, but only on one very specific and suspicious condition. Left with absolutely no other choice, highly skeptical Ryu reluctantly agrees to hear her out. She drops another massive bombshell, revealing that she desperately needs his help with a romantic confession. Ryo is completely dumbfounded, wondering why a cute girl would ask a certified loner for love advice. Despite his obvious reluctance, she refuses to take no for an answer, and basically forces him to cooperate. Realizing he is officially stuck with her, Ryo heavily sighs and accepts his new, unwanted role as a wingman. As they start walking together, Ryo internally questions his life choices and how he ended up in this absurd situation. The energetic girl cheerfully leads the way, seeming far too excited about her mysterious upcoming confession. When they finally arrive at their destination, Ryo nervously wonders exactly who the lucky guy is. To his surprise, the usually confident girl suddenly becomes incredibly shy and nervous as the moment approaches. Trying his best to be helpful, Ryu awkwardly steps up and tries to reassure her, giving her a small confidence boost. Taking a deep breath to calm her racing heart, the girl finally prepares to confess her true feelings. Reflecting on her behavior, Ryu realizes Asahi has always been clingy because he was her only friend growing up. He worries about her making friends in high school, knowing he only has 1 year left before graduation. But instead of appreciating his concern, she completely flips the script and mocks him for wasting his youth. She ruthlessly points out that his fulfilling otaku life is just a cope for never having a girlfriend. Hitting him where it hurts, she reminds him that his age perfectly matches the number of years he has been single. As if reading his mind about Yuta, she mercilessly teases him about his best friend getting a girlfriend before him. She is absolutely rubbing salt into his fresh wounds, leaving Ryo devastated and screaming in agony. Trying to defend his pride, he loudly declares that 2D characters and his remaining friends are all he needs. Unimpressed by his pathetic defense, she whips out a box of chocolate snacks with a devious smirk. Then, she drops a massive bombshell and asks if she should become his girlfriend. But knowing her twisted personality, there is an obvious catch. She challenges him to the Pocky game, declaring that the first one to pull away loses. Ryo is completely baffled by this sudden and ridiculous challenge from his annoying junior. Acting high and mighty, she claims she is taking pity on her loner senpai and giving him a chance with a real woman. But Ryo completely shuts her down, bluntly stating that he does not even see her as a woman. That brutally honest comment leaves her absolutely stunned and speechless. He confidently doubles down, claiming he only has eyes for his beloved waifu, Seiren. Dismissing her as just being her usual weird self, he tries to ignore the whole situation. But she refuses to back down, taunting him that the game should be easy if he really feels zero attraction to her. Unleashing a devastating combo of insults, she calls him a gross, unpopular virgin who is simply too scared to play. It's a nerve, and Ryu finally snaps at the obnoxious brat. She continues to gleefully mock his agitation, completely underestimating the monster she just woke up. Deciding he needs to put this cocky junior in her place, Ryo accepts the ridiculous challenge against his better judgment. With a sudden surge of confidence, he aggressively snaps the Pocky stick in his teeth and slams his hands on the desk. The game begins, but as they lean in, Ryu immediately realizes he made a huge miscalculation. Panicking internally, he wonders how she can remain completely calm with their faces inches apart. Up close, he is suddenly distracted by how incredibly small her face is and how long her eyelashes are. Staring intensely into her eyes, his tough act starts to crumble immediately. Just as he is about to admit she looks cute, she smugly asks if he is nervous. His heart pounding out of his chest, he desperately denies it, fully realizing he might actually lose this game. Unable to handle the intense proximity, he completely panics and abruptly pulls away, shattering the Pocky. Asahi is caught completely off guard, instantly flustered by his sudden retreat. But Ryo refuses to accept defeat, desperately trying to play it cool despite his racing heart. He deflects with a smirk, throwing her own accusation back and asking if she is the one feeling conscious of him. The tables have completely turned, and Asahi suddenly finds herself on the defense. Her face turns bright red as she desperately denies having any feelings for him whatsoever. Ryo just laughs, dismissing the entire situation and claiming he only pulled away because she was too close for comfort. He casually tells her to stop acting so arrogant about a stupid game. Furious at his nonchalant reaction, Asahi completely loses her composure and yells at him. Ryo declares himself the actual winner, leaving Asahi sputtering in absolute indignation. He teasingly questions who precisely ended up with a bright red face. With a smug grin, he solidifies his victory and completely flips the dynamic between them. Completely overwhelmed and embarrassed, Asahi weakly mutters a denial. But her teary eyes and flushed face completely betray her tough exterior. Realizing he might have pushed her a bit too far, Ryo playfully pats her on the head. He apologizes for being mean, his gentle gesture catching her completely off guard again. He softly advises her that games like this should be saved for someone she truly cares about, someone she might want as a lover. Leaving her with those parting words, he turns his back and walks out of the clubroom, shutting the door behind him. Alone in the room, Asahi is left completely flustered, burying her face in the Pocky box to hide her embarrassment. Meanwhile, Ryu walks away feeling surprisingly triumphant, admitting to himself that she actually made his heart skip a beat. The next day, as Ryo heads to school, he reflects on his status as Asahi's plaything for the past year. To his surprise, Asahi ambushes him at the gate, immediately teasing his messy bedhead. He sighs, resigning himself to her annoying company since she still has absolutely no friends. Once inside, she continues his torment, gleefully shoving a failed test paper directly in his face. She introduces herself narratively as his annoying junior and childhood friend. Ryo tries to ignore her, noting she only pesters him because the other club members are busy. However, the playful mood evaporates when she snatches a different piece of paper from his hand. Looking at it, she is genuinely shocked to discover it's a brochure for the ultra-elite Meitei University. Her jaw completely drops as she reads the name of the prestigious Tokyo school. Recovering her smug persona, she mockingly declares that such an elite school is only for stylish and cool people. She bluntly tells him that a plain otaku like him should simply aim for a standard local college. Frustrated by her constant belittling, Ryu snaps back, insisting he could easily ace the entrance exams if he actually tried. Never one to back down from a challenge, Asahi immediately calls his bluff with a devious smile. She whips out a pair of dice, challenging him to a seemingly simple logic puzzle. Her first question, if you roll 2 dice, what is the smallest possible sum of the numbers on top? Ryo immediately answers 2, scoffing at how ridiculously easy her test is. But Asahi gleefully hits him with a loud psst, declaring his obvious answer completely wrong. She smugly reveals the correct answer is 1, simply because the dice can be stacked on top of each other. Ryo calls her an idiot for using a cheap trick question instead of actual logic. Undeterred, she rolls the dice again, challenging him with a probability question just to prove he cannot beat her. She tries to brute force the dice probability manually, leaving him staring at her in utter bewilderment. He finally snaps, telling her to go back and redo elementary school because she can't even do basic arithmetic. She violently fires back with the classic excuse, screaming that you don't even need math to survive in this world. Boom! He violently slams his latest academic test on the desk, showcases a near-perfect score of 488 points. Glaring intensely, he fiercely warns her to never call him an idiot ever again. He quickly realizes that unless he literally spells everything out on paper, she just wouldn't get it. Leaning over his desk, he bluntly points out that studying has never exactly been her strong suit. He ruthlessly questions why she even bothered enrolling in such a challenging high school to begin with. With tears suddenly welling in her eyes, she unexpectedly confesses, "It's because I wanted to be with you." Completely caught off guard by her sudden honesty, he sits there in stunned silence with his mind racing. Despite his outward annoyance, he actually finds her relentless dedication incredibly cute. He finally pieces it together. She forced her way into this difficult school just to follow him, even though she absolutely hates studying. Leaning in close with a warm smile, he softly asks just how badly she really wanted to be with him. Flustered beyond belief, she fiercely blushes and violently sticks her tongue out in sheer panic. She frantically waves her arms, screaming at him not to get full of himself over her little confession. She desperately tries to save face, nervously insisting that it's just safer to have someone familiar around the campus. He sighs deeply from the bottom of his soul, accepting his fate as her only real friend in this entire school. With renewed confidence, he officially takes charge of her tutoring, boldly declaring, "I'll teach you." Her heart thumps wildly in her chest as she nervously asks if they should start with the first-year material. However, the fragile peace is instantly shattered as she yells, "Senpai, you idiot," and the brutal tutoring wars resume. The next day brings a massive shock as the academic rankings are officially posted, revealing Miyazono in undisputed first place. Looking entirely bored by her own sheer brilliance, Miyazono heavily sighs. First place again? Ugh, how boring. The entire hallway freezes in shock as the top-ranking student boldly approaches him and politely asks for a private word. Entering full panic mode, he nervously follows her down the hall, his mind racing as he wonders what on earth he did wrong. Once inside a quiet room, Miyazono completely drops her perfect facade, admitting the recent exam was a total letdown. She firmly states that she really expected Kageyama to step up and finally beat her this time around. Leaning in uncomfortably close with a sharp glare, she directly challenges him. "Do you like losing that much?" His competitive spirit violently ignites as he shouts back that losing actually pisses him off every single time. She angrily fires back with equal intensity, demanding to know if he genuinely thinks she enjoys losing either. He desperately tries to play it cool, muttering under his breath that he'll get serious when the university exams roll around. Unimpressed, Miyazono coldly dismisses his pathetic excuse as totally lame and completely boring. She fondly recalls the one single time he actually defeated her during their first year, and how genuinely excited she felt. For the brilliant Miyazono, that single crushing defeat was the very first time she had ever lost at anything in her entire life. Then, she mercilessly drops a massive bombshell, randomly bringing up his secret obsession with otaku culture. He scrambles for words, completely shocked that the top student knows he is the president of the Modern Culture Exchange Club. She viciously points out his administrative failure. He hasn't submitted a single required activity report for his precious club. Seeing a golden opportunity, she proposes a brilliant high-stakes bet. If he loses the next midterm, his club gets completely shut down. Meanwhile, out in the hallway, the blonde girl is frantically eavesdropping, internally panicking at how incredibly close they are standing. Miyazono confidently declares that since it's a formal bet, she will obviously put something massive on the line as well. In a shockingly bold move, she promises that if she loses the bet, she will do absolutely whatever he says. His mind instantly goes totally blank as he nervously gulps, his wild teenage imagination running at full speed. Overwhelmed by back-to-back defeats, both in academics and now mentally, Ryu slams his head on the desk in absolute frustration. But furious determination takes over as he violently stands back up, aggressively declaring that he will absolutely take her challenging bet. Miyazono teasingly questions if he's accepting just to make her do whatever he says, but Ryo fiercely defends his otaku pride. She leans in close with a sly grin, calling him out as the quiet, pervy type and correctly guessing his dirty thoughts. She further exposes him, ruthlessly pointing out that it felt like he was blatantly staring right at her chest earlier. In an absolute panic reflex, Ryu violently grabs the lapels of her uniform and tightly pulls them shut, screaming at her to close it up. Stepping out into the hallway, Ryu clutches his head in horror, totally blaming his sudden aggressive reflex on dealing with Asahi. His thoughts are instantly interrupted when he suddenly spots Asahi herself mysteriously crouching right outside the door. Caught completely red-handed, Asahi attempts the world's most pathetic excuse, claiming she was just happening to pass by. She quickly tries to flip the script, turning her jealous anger on him and demanding to know what he was doing with that elite student. Asahi brutally exposes his ridiculous grin, aggressively accusing him of acting entirely lovey-dovey with someone who is totally his type. With obvious jealousy boiling over, she firmly demands that Ryu make a high-stakes bet with her as well. She confidently declares her terms. The ultimate loser has to do absolutely whatever the winner orders them to do. Ryu immediately tries to reject the ridiculous battle, but Asahi forcefully insists, screaming that he doesn't have a choice in the matter. With fiery determination, she points a threatening finger and directly orders him to make sure he's entirely free after school. Fast forward to later, Asahi drags a bewildered Ryo straight to the loud and chaotic local arcade for a massive best-of-3 showdown. Ryo sighs in utter defeat, realizing this entire dramatic setup was just a massive excuse for her to come completely play games. The first intense battleground is clearly laid out before them, the highly competitive Taiko Festival rhythm game. Immediately asserting her dominance, Asahi effortlessly cranks her own difficulty setting to absolute maximum without breaking a sweat. The rhythm battle begins, and AU furiously struggles to keep up with the blindingly fast pace of the extreme level. Meanwhile, Asahi plays with terrifying precision, her drumsticks moving like an absolute blur as she perfectly hits every single note. Ryo stares at the screen in pure panic, quickly realizing that his junior childhood friend is a literal monster at this game. As the intense song ends, the dramatic silence from the arcade machine seals Ryu's completely humiliating fate. The final scoreboard is a brutal massacre. Asahi turns to the panting Ryu and mockingly asks if he wasn't supposed to be an experienced gamer. Desperate to reclaim his entirely shattered pride, Ryu angrily challenges her to a completely different competition in the racing games. The engines roar as they begin their virtual race, Ryu promising himself that he will crush her and completely restore his lost dignity. But Asahi proves to be absolutely ruthless, constantly harassing his car and trying to run him completely off the pixelated track. As they near the final stretch, Ryu forcefully manages to steal the lead, feeling the thrilling taste of an epic comeback victory. But Asahi plays incredibly dirty, dropping a devastating item the absolute second he takes first place, ruining his entire lead. The bright, go-over screen flashes, absolutely confirming Ryo's second brutal and deeply humiliating loss of the day. Moving on to the final challenge of their best-of-3, Asahi confidently leads their intense showdown to a claw machine. Refusing to go home without a single pathetic win, refusing to go home without a single pathetic win, refusing to go home without a single pathetic win, refusing to go home without a single pathetic win, refusing to go home without a single. But as the metal claw finally grabs the toy, Asahi violently panics and decides to physically interfere with his hard-earned victory. In a completely desperate cheating move, she violently throws herself right onto Ryu, screaming that he absolutely cannot win. The sudden physical contact completely wrecks his focus, causing the claw to brutally drop the prize straight back into the pit. Ryu furiously yells at her for blatantly breaking the rules, calling out her incredibly cheap and desperate physical attack. But Asahi completely ignores his valid protest, loudly celebrating her flawless 3-0 arcade victory over her pathetic senpai. As they finally step out of the loud arcade, the serene twilight casts a beautifully romantic glow over the quiet evening street. Ryo desperately tries to save face by blushing furiously and angrily muttering that he was only keeping her company, and it definitely wasn't a date. Asahi casually sips her drink with a smug smile, playfully poking at his fragile ego by asking if he's feeling totally embarrassed. With her complete and total victory secured, Asahi happily reminds the defeated Ryu of the terms of their absolute bet. She proudly announces that she has now earned one absolute command that he must obey at a later, unspecified time. Meanwhile, back in her quiet, lonely room, the brilliant student president Karen Maizono is doing some intense calculating. With a chillingly dangerous look in her sharp eyes, she darkly mutters that she will definitely have to make Kageyama take things seriously. A new day begins with absolute chaos at the Modern Culture Exchange Club, where Ryo's friends are desperately waving a new manga release. They heavily try to tempt him away from his books, practically begging him to join their usual lazy after-school otaku activities. Another friend shoves a picture on his phone, trying to bribe him with incredible weekend plans and expensive yakiniku dinners. But Rio is completely immune to their pathetic temptations, firmly pointing his pen at his textbook and confidently declaring that he has to study. Ryu aggressively shoos his annoying friends away, putting his entire club's survival on the line for the incredible upcoming academic bet. But his friends are absolutely relentless, loudly arguing right over his head about the massive benefits of going out to meet real 3D girls. They shove their phones in his face, aggressively demanding to know if he would rather study or spend just one glorious day experiencing the real world. Rio is completely overwhelmed and totally tempted, desperately gripping his pencil as his otaku resolve begins to violently crumble. Suddenly, the clubroom door forcefully slides open, revealing none other than the absolutely terrifying student president, Karen Maizono. The boys immediately freeze in total shock, but quickly start blushing when they notice her incredibly cute, glasses-wearing assistant standing right behind her. Without a single moment of hesitation, Karen coldly points at their massive collection and orders her assistant to dispose of the entire bookshelf. The club members erupt in absolute panic, frantically waving their hands and desperately begging her to stop her ruthless execution order. But Karen is completely merciless, aggressively pointing out that anime magazines and board games have absolutely zero educational value in a school environment. She violently doubles down, ordering her assistant to literally throw away every single thing in the room that could possibly be a distraction to studying. Rio begins to seriously panic, his face turning pale as he realizes his precious clubroom is being completely and aggressively taken over. Unable to take it anymore, Ryu finally snaps and angrily demands to know what right she has to just barge in and completely ruin their peaceful sanctuary. Karen casually brushes off his obvious outrage, coldly stating that she simply doesn't want to have a completely boring academic match with him. With a dangerously sharp glare, she brutally exposes his lazy secret, mentioning that she literally saw him wasting his precious time at the arcade just the other day. She looks at him with absolute disappointment, clearly feeling deeply insulted that he isn't taking their high-stakes studying bet seriously at all. To make matters infinitely worse, she suddenly snatches his phone right as a loud notification for his favorite gacha game violently pops up. His friends absolutely start losing their minds, realizing his most precious in-game character is on the line as Karen threateningly suggests simply deleting the app. Rio completely snaps into full survival mode, aggressively lunging forward to desperately save his precious mobile game account from total annihilation. Karen cruelly holds the phone just out of his reach, arrogantly declaring that with his pathetic attitude, he isn't even a real opponent. In the chaotic, desperate scramble to grab his phone, Ryu accidentally trips forward, violently crashing straight into the student president. The entire clubroom goes completely dead silent as Rio realizes he is now pinning the absolutely furious president right down onto the desk. Trying desperately to maintain her composure while being completely pinned down, Mizono mockingly asks if he's actually mad over some dumb game. But Ryo completely shocks everyone in the room, looking her dead in the eye as he flawlessly deletes the game right in front of her face. Leaning in even closer, he forcefully grips the desk and deeply declares that he is doing it simply because she made him get absolutely serious. With an incredibly intense, almost predatory smile, he fiercely warns the terrified student president to prepare herself for his ultimate victory. His friends are completely stunned by his incredibly bold move, nervously interrupting the intense moment to ask if his precious game data is permanently gone. Meanwhile, Mayozo is blushing furiously, clutching her chest and weakly comforting herself with the fact that his data is safely backed up to the cloud. Relief instantly washes over the club members as they loudly celebrate, confidently cheering that Ryu is definitely going to win this high-stakes bet. Left completely overwhelmed and hiding her deeply flushed face, Maizono violently blushes as she nervously wonders what in the world just got into him. With the clubroom door finally closed, the ultimate dramatic countdown begins with only 2 intense weeks left until the massive academic showdown. We kick things off with a quick translator's note, setting the stage for what's to come. Another rough sketch and translator note give us a quick breather before diving into the next chapter. The meta commentary continues as we prepare for the official start of the rainy day events. Bam! Ryu and Asahi get completely drenched by a passing car while walking in the pouring rain. Taking shelter at a bus stop, Asahi immediately starts teasing a soaking wet Ryo. Ryo looks absolutely visibly annoyed, wiping the rainwater off his unhappy face. Asahi confidently justifies why she's sticking by his side despite the miserable weather. Suddenly, the expensive car that splashed them pulls up, and President Miyazono rolls down the window to apologize. May's eyes widen as she immediately recognizes Ryo standing in the rain. Next thing they know, Ryo and Asahi are squished into the backseat of Miyazono's luxurious car. Miyazono politely apologizes for the cramped space and gracefully offers them some tissues. She leans back and kindly extends the box of tissues toward a very grumpy Asahi. Asahi aggressively snatches the tissues and starts fiercely wiping her wet face. Asahi suddenly notices how incredibly good Miyazono smells and comments on it. She becomes hyper-aware of all of Miyazono's perfect qualities, sitting so close to her. Intense jealousy flares up in Asahi's eyes as she glares at the flawless student council president. Ryo casually glances over and notices Asahi shivering in her damp clothes. Without a second thought, Ryu takes off his dry jacket and drapes it over Asahi's shoulders. Miyazono warmly smiles and compliments Ryo on his unexpected gentlemanly kindness. Ryu immediately blushes, turning his head away and downplaying his sweet gesture. He tries to cover his embarrassment by teasing Asahi about being naturally clumsy. They arrive at their stop. Miyazono's grandfather apologizes for the splash, and Miyazono generously offers them an umbrella. Asahi puts on a fake, polite smirk, thanking Miyazono while secretly glaring daggers at her. Before leaving, Ryo confidently points at Miyazono and boldly declares he won't lose to her in the exams. Miyazono beams a brilliant smile back, perfectly accepting his challenge for a fair match. The second the car drives away, Ryo completely loses his cool and starts panicking over his bold promise. Meanwhile, Asahi suddenly starts acting completely erratic and aggressive toward a confused Ryu. Her jealousy absolutely boils over as she relentlessly interrogates him about his interaction with Miyazono. In the car, Miyazono quietly reflects on the oddly close dynamic between Ryu and Asahi. Asahi wildly jumps to conclusions, dramatically assuming Ryo and Miyazono shared a secret kiss. The scene abruptly shifts, plunging us into the spooky, pitch-black atmosphere of the empty school at night. Ryo and Asahi sneak their way into the dark, eerie school building together. Asahi tries to act tough, making scary ghost faces to tease Ryo while secretly trembling herself. Ryo lets out a heavy sigh and completely ignores her, focusing on finding his forgotten homework. Asahi refuses to quit, aggressively trying to spook Ryu with dumb ghost stories. Ryo stoically walks down the dark hallway, doing his best to block out Asahi's annoying antics. Suddenly, a strange noise echoes, and Asahi physically jumps, entering his absolute terror. Unfazed, Ryu successfully locates his forgotten homework notebook sitting neatly on a desk. Mission accomplished. The two quickly hustle out of the terrifyingly quiet school building. They step outside into the night air, both letting out a massive sigh of relief. Asahi instantly flips her attitude, demanding Ryu admit he was terrified inside. Ryu stubbornly crosses his arms and firmly denies being scared of the dark. Asahi playfully shoves him, clearly refusing to believe his tough guy act. They continue walking away from the school grounds, bickering back and forth. Asahi just keeps talking and talking, relentlessly teasing him without a single pause. Ryo finally snaps, jokingly telling her she can walk the rest of the way home alone. Asahi angrily pouts, turning her back to him and suddenly speeding up her pace. Ryu stares in blatant confusion at how incredibly fast her mood swings can happen. I'll be totally fine without him, Asahi dramatically grumbles to herself. But after taking 2 steps, she spins around with a face full of wide-eyed panic. Ryu steps up and firmly grabs her hand, annoyed but reassuring her there are no ghosts. Asahi's face turns bright red, blushing furiously while refusing to let go of his grip. Ryu smirks and teasingly points out that her sweaty hand gives away her fear. Asahi gets incredibly defensive, yelling that she's not sweaty and calling him gross. Ryo laughs, confidently threatening to let her hand go if she thinks he's so gross. In a panic, Asahi clutches onto his hand even tighter, absolutely terrified and blushing. Ryu looks down at her with a remarkably genuine, soft smile. He playfully teases her for giving up her tough act so easily. Asahi nervously looks away, thoroughly embarrassed but stubbornly holding on to him. Suddenly, a flashlight beam hits them, and Ryo's little brother Yuta appears in the hallway. They both jump out of their skin, realizing the ghost haunting the school was just Yuta all along. The next day at school, the highly anticipated midterm rankings are finally posted on the bulletin board. Everyone is absolutely stunned as the unbeatable president Meizono officially loses her #1 spot to Ryu. Ryo's friends are in complete hysterics, mind blown by his legendary victory. Ryo flashes a smug, triumphant grin directly at Meizono, reveling in his massive win. Meizono visibly struggles to hide her intense frustration at her devastating defeat. She tries to save face, arguing that the English section was just way too easy this time around. Ryo waves off her excuses, proudly declaring that the Modern Culture Exchange Club is officially saved. He steps closer and drops a massive bombshell. Meizono's punishment is to become his club's vice president. Ryu brilliantly explains his strategy. With the student council president on their roster, the school can never shut them down. Meizono looks incredibly mildly annoyed that he's shamelessly using her reputation to shield his club. Ryo smoothly whips out a club application form and hands it straight to her. He flashes a wild grin and reminds her of their heavy bet. She must do whatever he says. Meizono's expression darkens before she suddenly smirks and seductively tugs at her collar. She leans in suggestively, teasingly asking if joining a club is really the best use of his do-anything ticket. Ryu quickly shuts it down, demanding that losers should act frustrated instead of flirting. But his expression softens as he honestly admits he's truly happy she didn't hold back. Meizono looks genuinely moved by his surprisingly earnest words. Suddenly, the locker door right beside them begins to rattle ominously. Bang! Asahi awkwardly tumbles right out of the dark locker, landing on the floor. Asahi laughs nervously from the ground, looking completely ridiculous as they stare at her. She frantically tries to explain away her incredibly suspicious hiding spot. Meizono doesn't miss a beat and cheerfully announces, "By the way, I'm the new VP of this club." Asahi's jaw practically hits the floor as she whips her head between Ryo and Meizono in disbelief. Ryo flatly dismisses Asahi, stating she doesn't even have any nerdy hobbies to be in an otaku club. Meizono smoothly counters that she actually reads a lot of manga, proving her own geek credibility. Ryu is absolutely stunned that the perfect student president is a secret otaku. Actual tears start welling up in Asahi's eyes as the jealousy becomes too much to handle. She dramatically latches onto Ryo's arm, whining, "I'm joining this club too." Meizono lets out a haughty, confident laugh, thoroughly enjoying Asahi's total meltdown. Not backing down, Meizono grabs Ryo's other arm, clinging tightly to him as well. Ryo breaks into a complete panic sweat, helplessly trapped between two gorgeous girls warring over him and mourning his peaceful otaku life.